Picture a quiet Tuesday evening in late autumn, the kind of evening where families sit down to dinner, kids finish homework, and neighbors wave goodnight from their porches. The streetlights flicker on one by one. Somewhere a dog barks, a car door closes. Normal sounds, safe sounds, the sounds of a neighborhood where nothing bad ever happens. On this particular street, in this particular neighborhood, everyone knew everyone. They borrowed sugar, they carpooled to school, they watched each other's homes when someone went on vacation. They trusted each other, because that's what neighbors do, right? That's what communities are built on, trust. But on November 14th, that trust shattered into 1,000 pieces. At approximately 9:47 p.m., police vehicles descended on Maple Grove Drive. Red and blue lights sliced through the darkness. Officers moved quickly, purposefully. Crime scene tape went up. Neighbors came out of their houses in bathrobes and slippers, confusion and fear written across their faces. What happened? Who? Why? She looked like any other neighbor. She baked cookies. She offered to babysit. She remembered everyone's birthday. She always had a warm smile and a helpful hand. The kind of person you'd trust with your house keys. The kind of person you'd trust with your children until the doors closed. Because behind that perfect smile, behind those kind eyes, behind that helpful facade, something else lived, something cold, something calculating, something evil. This is the story of the woman next door, the story of how one person can wear so many masks that even those closest to her never see the monster underneath. This is a story about trust betrayed, lives destroyed, and a community that learned too late that evil doesn't always announce itself with a roar. Sometimes it knocks on your door with a homemade pie. Her name was Sarah Mitchell. Born April 3, 1975, in a small town so unremarkable that most people drove through it without even noticing. She was the middle child of 3. Her father worked at the local factory. Her mother was a homemaker. On paper, completely ordinary. The kind of family you'd see at church on Sundays, at Little League games, at PTA meetings. But inside that ordinary house, something was already wrong. Sarah's teachers described her as quiet, reserved, the kind of student who never caused problems, who always had her homework done, who sat in the back of the class and never spoke unless called upon. Some teachers barely remembered her at all. She was forgettable, invisible, which, as we would learn later, was exactly what she wanted to be. But there were signs, small things, the kind of things that adults dismissed as childhood cruelty or overactive imagination. A neighborhood cat went missing. Sarah's family found it 3 days later in their garage, dead, with no visible injuries. When asked if she knew anything about it, 8-year-old Sarah simply stared at her mother and said, "Cats shouldn't wander where they don't belong." A classmate's pet rabbit died mysteriously in its cage overnight. The family lived 3 doors down from the Mitchells. The rabbit had been healthy that morning. By evening, it was dead. The vet couldn't determine a cause. Sarah had been seen in their backyard that afternoon, just playing, she said. When Sarah was 12, her younger brother David fell down the basement stairs. He survived with a broken arm, 3 fractured ribs, and a concussion that kept him in the hospital for 2 days. He told his parents he slipped. He told the doctors he slipped. But he told his best friend something different. He said Sarah pushed him, that she'd been standing at the top of the stairs, and when he walked past her, she smiled and shoved him hard in the back. He said he remembered tumbling, remembered the pain, and remembered looking up from the bottom of the stairs to see Sarah standing at the top, still smiling, saying nothing. His parents didn't believe him. Sarah was too gentle, too quiet. She'd never hurt anyone. It must have been an accident. David was just confused from the head injury, right? By high school, Sarah had learned something crucial, something that would define the rest of her life. She learned how to wear a mask, how to become exactly what people wanted to see. She joined the drama club and discovered she had a talent for acting. She could cry on command. She could make people believe anything she wanted them to believe. She could be anyone. She volunteered at the church. She helped elderly neighbors with their groceries. She babysat for free. She tutored younger students. Everyone loved Sarah Mitchell. She won a community service award in her junior year. The local newspaper did a small piece on her, calling her an inspiration to her peers. And all the while she was watching, studying, learning how people worked, what made them trust, what made them vulnerable, What made them weak? Her brother David moved out the day he turned 18 and never came back. He wouldn't speak about his sister. When pressed, he would only say, "She's not who you think she is. She's not who anyone thinks she is." But no one listened, because Sarah was perfect, and perfect people don't hurt others. Do they? In 2010, at age 35, Sarah Mitchell moved to Maple Grove. She'd been married briefly in her 20s, but the marriage ended after just 2 years. Her ex-husband moved across the country immediately after the divorce. He refused to give interviews. The one time a reporter managed to reach him by phone, he said 3 words before hanging up: "She's not human." Maple Grove was the perfect, fresh start. A quiet, suburban community about 30 miles outside the city. Tree-lined streets, good schools, the kind of place where people knew their neighbors' names and actually meant it when they said hello. Sarah bought a charming 2-bedroom house on a corner lot. She moved in on a sunny Saturday in May, and by Sunday evening, half the neighborhood had met her. She'd brought homemade cookies to 5 houses. She'd offered to help 2 families carry in their groceries. She'd complimented gardens and admired children and remembered everyone's names. She was like a breath of fresh air, one neighbor recalled. So friendly, so genuine. You know how sometimes new neighbors keep to themselves? Not Sarah. She wanted to be part of the community from day one. Within a month, she joined the neighborhood book club. Within 2 months, she was organizing the summer block party. Within 3 months, she was the person everyone called when they needed something: dog sitting, emergency babysitting, a ride to the airport. Sarah was always available, always happy to help, always there. She baked constantly: pies, cookies, casseroles, bread. "I just love cooking for people," she'd say with that warm smile. "It makes me feel connected." She'd bring food to new mothers, to families dealing with illness, to anyone who seemed like they might need a little extra support. She volunteered at the elementary school library. She organized a charity drive for the local food bank. She got certified in CPR and first aid, just in case anyone ever needs help. She was, by every measure, the perfect neighbor. But perfection is exhausting. And sometimes, late at night, when everyone else was asleep, cracks would show. A neighbor's security camera caught her standing motionless in someone's driveway at 2:47 a.m., just standing, staring at their house for 11 minutes. When confronted, she laughed it off. "Oh God, how embarrassing. I have trouble sleeping sometimes and I go for walks. I must have zoned out. Sorry if I freaked you out." Pets started going missing. Small dogs, cats, a family's pet rabbit. Search parties were organized. Sarah always volunteered to help search. The pets were never found. A woman named Patricia Chen mentioned to Sarah that she was going on vacation for 2 weeks. When Patricia returned, she found items moved in her house. Small things: a picture frame relocated, books rearranged, kitchen utensils in different drawers. She thought she was going crazy. Maybe she'd forgotten how she'd left things, but deep down, she knew. Someone had been in her house. Someone had been touching her things. She never mentioned it to Sarah. She didn't want to seem paranoid. Another neighbor, James, started noticing his trash had been gone through. Not by animals. Someone was carefully opening the bags, examining contents, and closing them back up. He thought it might be identity thieves. He started shredding all his documents. He never suspected the friendly woman who always waved from across the street. Sarah knew things she shouldn't know: personal things, private things. She'd casually mention someone's medical appointment before they'd told anyone. She'd congratulate someone on a job interview before the interview had even happened. She'd know family arguments, financial troubles, relationship problems. When asked how she knew, she'd smile and say, "Oh, you must have mentioned it and I remembered. I have a good memory." But people hadn't mentioned it. They couldn't have. They'd told no one. Sarah was always watching, always listening, always learning, because knowledge is power, and power was what Sarah craved more than anything. The Henderson family moved to Maple Grove in the summer of 2012. Tom and Jennifer Henderson, both in their early 40s with 2 children. Emma was 8, Michael was 10. They were exactly the kind of family that makes a neighborhood feel complete, happy, normal, safe. Sarah was the first person to welcome them. She appeared at their door within hours of the moving truck leaving, holding a homemade apple pie still warm from the oven. "Welcome to the neighborhood," she said with that perfect smile. "I'm Sarah. I live just down the street. If you need anything at all, please don't hesitate to ask." Jennifer Henderson would later say that in that moment she felt nothing but gratitude and relief. Moving to a new place is stressful. Having someone immediately reach out with kindness felt like a blessing. Within weeks, Sarah had become a fixture in the Henderson household. She'd stop by with fresh cookies. She'd offer to pick up the kids from school when Jennifer was running late. She'd bring over dinner on nights when both Tom and Jennifer had to work late. She'd stay and chat, laugh at their jokes, admire their home, compliment their parenting. The children adored her. They called her Aunt Sarah. She'd read them bedtime stories. She'd help with homework. She'd play board games with them for hours. She seemed to genuinely love children. She was patient, kind, never got frustrated or annoyed. "I thought I'd found a real friend," Jennifer later told police, tears streaming down her face. "Someone I could trust, someone who actually cared about my family." Sarah knew everything about the Hendersons. She knew Tom's work schedule down to the minute. She knew Jennifer saw a therapist every other Thursday at 2 p.m. She knew Emma was afraid of thunderstorms. She knew Michael struggled with math. She knew they kept their spare key under a fake rock by the back door. She had a key to their house. "For emergencies," Jennifer had said, "in case we lock ourselves out or need someone to check on things when we're away." But Sarah used that key when they weren't away, when they were at work, when they were at school. She'd let herself in and walk through their house, touch their things, read their mail, look through their photographs, sit in their chairs, lie on their beds. She'd spray Jennifer's perfume, try on Jennifer's jewelry, stand in front of their family photos, and imagine herself in them. She kept detailed journals, pages and pages documenting every detail of the Henderson family's life. What they ate, what time they went to bed, what shows they watched, what they argued about, their routines, their habits, their weaknesses, their secrets. But the Hendersons weren't the only family Sarah focused on. There were others. The Chen family lived next door to Sarah, Robert and Linda Chen, with their 12-year-old son, Kevin. Robert was a software engineer who worked from home 2 days a week. Linda was a nurse who worked night shifts. Kevin was a quiet boy who loved astronomy. Sarah befriended them too. She'd bring Robert coffee when she saw him working in his home office. She'd chat with Linda about nursing, claiming her mother had been a nurse. She'd let Kevin use her telescope, which she'd bought specifically after learning about his interest in space. The Martinez family lived across the street. David Martinez was recently divorced and struggling. Sarah was there with casseroles, with a listening ear, with advice. She helped him set up online dating profiles. She offered to watch his daughter when his ex-wife canceled her weekend visits. The Wilson household was 3 doors down. Margaret Wilson was 78 and living alone after her husband died. Sarah visited her 3 times a week, helped with shopping, drove her to doctor's appointments, managed her medications. Everyone trusted Sarah. Everyone thought they knew her. Everyone was wrong. Because trust is like a door. You open it voluntarily. You let someone in. And sometimes you never realize they've stolen the key to lock you inside. October 15th, 2014, a date that would haunt Jennifer Henderson for the rest of her life. It was a normal Wednesday, or it should have been. Jennifer had a late meeting at work. Tom was out of town on business. She'd asked Sarah to pick up Emma from school. It was something Sarah had done dozens of times before. Never a problem, never a worry. School ended at 3:30 p.m. Sarah was always early, always waiting in the pickup line with that friendly smile. The teachers knew her. They trusted her. Emma would run to Sarah's car, happy to see Aunt Sarah, chattering about her day. At 4:15 p.m., Jennifer called Sarah's phone. No answer. She wasn't worried yet. Maybe they'd stopped for ice cream. Maybe Sarah's phone was in her purse and she didn't hear it. At 4:45 p.m., Jennifer called again. Still no answer. Now she was starting to feel uneasy. She called the school. They confirmed Emma had left with Sarah at 3:35 p.m. Everything seemed normal. At 5:30 p.m., Jennifer left work early and drove home. Sarah's car wasn't in her driveway. The house was dark. Emma wasn't home. At 6 p.m., Jennifer called the police. The next 7 hours were a nightmare. Police arrived, questions were asked, search parties formed, neighbors came out to help look, everyone except Sarah, because no one could find Sarah either. Her phone went straight to voicemail. Her house was empty. Her car was gone. She had simply vanished with an 8-year-old girl. Tom was on the next flight home, frantic, terrified, imagining every horrible possibility. Jennifer sat in her kitchen, staring at her phone, praying for it to ring. The police set up a command center. Amber Alert protocols were being discussed. The FBI was being notified. And then, at 10:47 p.m., headlights appeared in Sarah's driveway. Sarah's car pulled in slowly. Police officers rushed over immediately, weapons drawn but not raised. The driver's door opened. Sarah stepped out, looking confused, almost dazed. "Is everything okay?" she asked. "Why are there police cars everywhere?" In the back seat, Emma was asleep, completely unconscious. She didn't stir when the door opened, didn't wake when an officer gently lifted her out, didn't respond when her mother screamed her name. Emma was rushed to the hospital. Sarah was taken to the police station. And slowly, a story emerged that made no sense at all. Sarah claimed she'd told Jennifer about her plans. She said she'd gotten permission to take Emma out for a special day. Ice cream, then the park, then a movie. She insisted Jennifer knew about it. She seemed genuinely confused about why everyone was upset. But Jennifer had no memory of any such conversation. There were no text messages, no voicemail, no email, no evidence at all that this outing had been planned or approved. "I thought she'd be happy," Sarah told police, her voice soft and hurt. "I was just trying to give Emma a fun day. I didn't mean to cause any trouble." At the hospital, Emma slowly woke up. But she couldn't remember most of the day. She remembered leaving school with Sarah. She remembered getting in the car. Then, nothing. Blank spaces. Confusion. She woke up not knowing where she was or how much time had passed. Blood tests revealed traces of diphenhydramine in Emma's system, an over-the-counter sleep medication, a lot of it, enough to keep a child unconscious for hours. Sarah claimed Emma must have been tired, that she fell asleep naturally. She denied giving her any medication. She had no idea how it got in Emma's system. Maybe the movie theater had been too warm. Maybe Emma was coming down with something. The police investigated. They reviewed security footage from every store, every park, every movie theater in a 30-mile radius. They found nothing. 7 hours were unaccounted for. 7 hours where an 8-year-old girl was unconscious, and no one knew where she had been or what had happened to her. Emma was examined by doctors. Physically, she was unharmed, no injuries, no signs of abuse. But psychologically, the trauma was profound. She developed intense separation anxiety. She had nightmares she couldn't quite remember. She would wake up screaming about doors closing and not being able to get out. The police wanted to charge Sarah with kidnapping, with child endangerment, but legally it was complicated. Emma was unharmed. Sarah insisted it was a misunderstanding. There was no clear evidence of intent to harm. The case fell into a gray area. In the end, no charges were filed. Sarah was released. The Hendersons were told to pursue a restraining order if they wanted to keep Sarah away. They did more than that. They cut all ties immediately. They changed their locks. They told their children to never speak to Sarah again. They installed security cameras. And 3 months later, they put their house on the market and moved to a different state. Sarah stood at her window the day they left, watching the moving truck drive away. Neighbors who saw her that day said she looked calm, almost peaceful. And just before the truck turned the corner and disappeared from view, they saw her smile. 5 months after the Henderson incident in March 2015, Robert Chen died. Robert Chen was Sarah's next-door neighbor, 42 years old, healthy, active. He jogged every morning at 6 a.m. without fail. Everyone set their clocks by Robert's morning runs. You could hear his footsteps on the sidewalk, rhythmic and steady, every single day. Except on March 12, 2015, Robert Chen didn't come home from his run. His body was found at the bottom of a ravine near his usual jogging trail. The wooden railing that should have prevented such a fall had given way. The official determination was accidental death due to equipment failure. The railing was old, poorly maintained. These things happen, tragic but not suspicious, except for a few troubling details that didn't quite add up. Robert's wife, Linda, mentioned that the night before he died, Sarah had visited. She'd brought cookies, as usual. She and Robert had talked on the back porch for nearly an hour while Linda put their son to bed. When Linda came back out, Robert looked shaken, pale. She asked what they'd discussed, and he just shook his head. "Nothing important," he said. But Linda knew her husband. Something was wrong. And then there was the matter of Robert's life insurance policy, $500,000. Beneficiary, his wife Linda. But in the weeks following his death, as Linda tried to navigate her grief and her new financial reality, Sarah was there, helpful, supportive, offering to manage paperwork, to handle communications with insurance companies, to take care of the complicated financial matters so Linda could focus on her son and her grief. Linda, overwhelmed and trusting, signed papers Sarah put in front of her. She didn't read them carefully. She didn't question. Sarah was her friend. Sarah was helping. It wasn't until 6 months later that Linda discovered Sarah had somehow gotten herself named as executor of the estate, that over $200,000 had been transferred to accounts Sarah controlled, that she'd been systematically stealing from a widow. By then, Sarah had moved the money through several accounts. Recovering it would require expensive legal action. Linda couldn't afford to fight. She'd lost her husband and her financial security. She moved away with her son, broken and defeated. But Robert Chen's death was just the beginning. In August 2015, Margaret Wilson died. Heart attack. She was 78 years old. She'd been in declining health. These things happen with elderly people. Natural causes, nothing suspicious. Except Margaret had updated her will 6 weeks before her death. The previous version left everything to her 2 adult children. The new version left everything to Sarah Mitchell, who had been like a daughter to her in her final months. Margaret's children contested the will, claiming Sarah had manipulated their vulnerable mother. But the document was legally sound. Sarah got the house, the savings, the investments, nearly $400,000. In December 2015, David Martinez died. Sudden organ failure, multiple systems shutting down simultaneously. The doctors were baffled. David was only 51. He'd been healthy. Toxicology reports came back inconclusive. Sometimes bodies just fail. Medical mysteries happen. David's ex-wife was the beneficiary of his life insurance. She and Sarah had become very close friends. After David's death, Sarah helped her friend manage the insurance money. The friend later claimed Sarah had convinced her to invest in several failed business ventures that Sarah had connections to. She lost almost everything. And then, in June 2016, there was Thomas Perry. Thomas was 35, a teacher, no history of depression, no known problems. By every account, he was happy, healthy, planning for the future. He'd been dating Sarah for a few months. Then he broke up with her. "This isn't working," he told her. "I need space." 2 weeks later, Thomas was found dead in his garage. Carbon monoxide poisoning. A hose running from his car's exhaust pipe into the sealed garage. A handwritten note beside him saying he couldn't go on anymore. His sister insisted it wasn't suicide. The handwriting looked wrong to her. Thomas was left-handed and had messy handwriting. The note was written in carefully neat right-handed script. But handwriting analysis was inconclusive. The police ruled it suicide. Case closed. Neighbors reported seeing Sarah's car parked near Thomas's house the night he died. When questioned, Sarah said she was home alone all night. No witnesses, no way to prove otherwise. 4 deaths in less than 2 years. All connected to Sarah Mitchell, all explainable individually. Accidents, natural causes, suicide, unfortunate coincidences. But put them together and a pattern emerged, a pattern of death that followed Sarah Mitchell wherever she went. Insurance money, inheritance, financial gain, or perhaps just the thrill of it, the power over life and death. The community was starting to whisper, starting to wonder, starting to fear. But fear isn't evidence, and whispers aren't proof. And Sarah Mitchell, the helpful neighbor, the kind friend, continued to smile and wave and bake her cookies and offer her assistance to anyone who needed it, while bodies piled up around her. By late 2017, people were starting to connect the dots they'd been afraid to connect before. It started quietly. Whispered conversations at the grocery store, uncomfortable glances at neighborhood meetings, people finding excuses not to accept Sarah's dinner invitations, families suddenly too busy to accept her offers of help. Andrea Mills lived 3 houses down from Sarah. She'd been friendly with Sarah for years. They'd had coffee together dozens of times. They'd talked about everything, or so Andrea thought. But after Robert Chen's death, after Margaret Wilson's death, after David Martinez's death, after Thomas Perry's death, Andrea started paying attention in a way she hadn't before. She started watching. She'd wake up at 2 in the morning and see lights on in Sarah's house. She'd see Sarah's car leaving at strange hours, coming back before dawn. She'd see Sarah standing at her window, perfectly still, staring out at the neighborhood for hours. Andrea started keeping notes, dates, times, observations. She felt crazy doing it, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was very, very wrong. Michael Rodriguez, another neighbor, had installed security cameras after a break-in scare. When he reviewed the footage, he found hours of video showing Sarah in his backyard, at night, walking around, looking in windows, trying door handles. He counted at least a dozen separate incidents over 6 months. When he confronted her, Sarah looked confused, said she was looking for her cat. But Sarah didn't have a cat. She never had. Other neighbors started checking their own security footage, and there she was, Sarah, appearing in multiple backyards, multiple nights, always after midnight, always quiet, always watching. People started noticing their things had been moved, subtle changes in their homes. Doors they knew they'd locked were unlocked. Windows they'd closed were open. The feeling that someone had been inside, touching their belongings, violating their space. And then Andrea did something that might have saved lives. She started going through Sarah's trash. She knew how it sounded. She knew it was crazy, but she had to know. She had to see if her instincts were right. So, late one night, wearing gloves, she took bags from Sarah's trash bin and brought them home to sort through. What she found made her blood run cold. Prescription pill bottles with other people's names on them. Robert Chen, Margaret Wilson, dead people. Why would Sarah have their medications? Photographs, dozens of them. Pictures of people sleeping, pictures taken through windows, pictures of families who had no idea they were being watched and photographed. Notebooks filled with handwritten notes, names, addresses, schedules, personal information, details about people's lives that Sarah shouldn't know and couldn't know unless she was actively stalking them. Andrea photographed everything. Then she put it all back exactly as she found it. And the next morning, she took her evidence to the police. Detective Rodriguez listened to Andrea's concerns. He looked at the photographs she'd taken. He reviewed similar complaints the department had received over the past year. People feeling watched, people suspecting Sarah, people too afraid to formally accuse her. They started a quiet investigation, phone records, financial records, security footage from every business in the neighborhood. They tracked Sarah's movements, her purchases, her online activity. And slowly, piece by piece, they started to see what Andrea had seen, a pattern of surveillance, a pattern of manipulation, a pattern that suggested Sarah Mitchell was far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. They just needed one mistake, one piece of concrete evidence that could stand up in court. On January 19, 2018, they got it. Sarah had befriended a new family that had just moved to the neighborhood, the Petersons, parents and their 6-year-old daughter. Sarah had been doing her usual routine, friendly, helpful, trustworthy. The Petersons asked her to watch their daughter for a few hours while they went to a doctor's appointment. Sarah agreed happily, but a neighbor who'd been warned by Andrea about Sarah's behavior saw Sarah leave her house with the little girl, saw them get in the car, and immediately called the police. Officers followed Sarah's car. They watched her drive to an isolated area outside town. They watched her park near an abandoned building. They watched her sit in the car with the child for over an hour, just sitting there doing nothing. When they approached the vehicle, Sarah claimed she and the little girl were playing a game, hide and seek with the parents. The child, however, seemed confused and frightened. She didn't understand where she was or why. And in Sarah's purse, officers found a bottle of liquid diphenhydramine, the same sleep medication that had been found in Emma Henderson's system 3 years earlier. That was enough for a warrant, enough to finally look inside Sarah Mitchell's house and see what she'd been hiding all along. At 6:47 a.m. on January 19, 2018, Detective Rodriguez and 12 officers surrounded Sarah Mitchell's house. They had a search warrant. They had probable cause. They had backup standing by. They were prepared for anything, or so they thought. Detective Rodriguez knocked on the door. "Sarah Mitchell, this is the police. We have a warrant to search the premises. Please open the door." Silence. They knocked again, louder. "Police, open the door now." Still nothing. No sound from inside, no movement, but her car was in the garage. Lights had been on an hour earlier. She was in there. They made the decision to breach the door. The battering ram hit once, twice, and the door splintered open. Officers flooded inside, weapons drawn, shouting identification and instructions. The house was empty, or it seemed empty at first. The living room was immaculate, perfectly clean, perfectly organized, everything in its place. Not a dish in the sink, not a magazine out of place. It looked like a show home, not like anyone actually lived there. But as officers moved through the house, they began to notice things. Photographs on the walls, hundreds of them. Sarah smiling with neighbors, Sarah at community events, Sarah with families, with children, with the people who had trusted her, with the people who had died. They found Sarah in the basement. She was sitting in a chair, perfectly still, hands folded in her lap, staring at the wall. She didn't turn when they entered, didn't move, didn't speak, just sat there, like a statue. "Sarah Mitchell, you're under arrest. Put your hands behind your back." She stood slowly, turned to face them, and smiled. That same warm, friendly smile she'd used on her neighbors for 8 years. "Of course, officers. Whatever you need. I'm always happy to help." They cuffed her and led her upstairs. And as they did, they began to understand the true horror of what Sarah Mitchell had been doing. The basement was divided into sections. Along one wall, filing cabinets filled with documents, insurance policies, wills, bank statements, medical records, all belonging to other people, stolen, copied, cataloged. Along another wall, computers, 3 monitors. And on those screens, when they powered them up, surveillance software. Sarah had hacked into her neighbors' home security systems, their baby monitors, their smart speakers. She'd been watching and listening to them for years, but it was the walls that made seasoned detectives feel sick. Thousands of photographs, every neighbor, every family, their daily routines documented in terrifying detail. Photos of people sleeping, people showering, people in their most private, vulnerable moments. Photos taken through windows, through gaps in curtains, through any available crack in privacy, and handwritten notes, everywhere, covering every surface, names, schedules, weaknesses, fears, secrets. Sarah had documented everything about everyone. One wall was dedicated to the Henderson family, every member cataloged, every routine noted, and at the center, a large photo of Emma Henderson, with notes around it detailing her schedule, her fears, her habits, and in red marker, one word, mine. Another section was devoted to victims, Robert Chen, Margaret Wilson, David Martinez, Thomas Perry, and others, names the police didn't recognize. Other victims, perhaps, from other places, other times. Each victim's section contained detailed notes about their death, how it was planned, how it was executed, how Sarah had ensured it looked like an accident or natural causes or suicide. She'd kept trophies, too. Robert Chen's watch, Margaret Wilson's favorite necklace, Thomas Perry's house keys, and journals. Dozens of journals, Sarah's own handwritten accounts of her crimes, written in meticulous detail, not confessions of guilt, but bragging, proud accounts of how clever she'd been, how she'd fooled everyone, how easy it had been to make people trust her, how powerful it made her feel to decide who lived and who died. One entry read, "They're all so desperate to be liked, to be accepted, that they'll believe anything. Smile at them, bake them cookies, pretend to care, and they'll hand you the keys to their lives, their homes, their children, their trust. And once you have their trust, you have everything. You have power over life and death. and that power is the only thing that's ever made me feel truly alive. As they were cataloging evidence, one officer made a discovery that changed everything. Hidden in a locked drawer, they found plans, future plans, a list of names, families Sarah hadn't targeted yet, and detailed notes about how she intended to kill each one. The Petersons, the family whose daughter Sarah had taken that morning, were at the top of the list. They'd stopped her just in time. Sarah was transported to the county jail. During booking, she remained calm, almost cheerful. When asked if she wanted to make a statement, she smiled and said, "I was just being a good neighbor. That's all I ever wanted. To be helpful, to be needed, to be remembered." When her lawyer arrived and advised her to stop talking, Sarah looked disappointed, as if she'd been enjoying the attention, enjoying the chance to finally show everyone how clever she'd been. Over the next weeks and months, the full scope of Sarah Mitchell's crimes emerged. Forensic analysis of her computers revealed she'd been stalking and manipulating neighbors for 8 years. Financial records showed she'd stolen over $1 million through insurance fraud, inheritance manipulation, and outright theft. And most chillingly, they found evidence linking her to at least 7 deaths, possibly more. Sarah Mitchell, the helpful neighbor, the kind friend, the perfect community member, was a serial killer who'd been operating in over the next weeks and months. The full scope of Sarah Mitchell's crimes emerged. Forensic analysis of her computers revealed she'd been stalking and manipulating neighbors for 8 years. Financial records showed she'd stolen over $1 million through insurance fraud, inheritance manipulation, and outright theft. And most chillingly, they found evidence linking her to at least 7 deaths, possibly more. Sarah Mitchell, the helpful neighbor, the kind friend, the perfect community member, was a serial killer who'd been operating in plain sight. Detective Morrison stared at the evidence board, hundreds of photographs spread across the wall like a twisted family album. Each image captured Sarah Mitchell at different moments: Christmas parties, block barbecues, children's birthday parties. In every photo, her smile was perfect, her posture welcoming, but now he could see the predator hiding behind those eyes. She chose them carefully, FBI profiler Dr. Sarah Chen explained to the task force. Elderly neighbors living alone, widowers, people with health problems. She'd study them for months, learning their routines, their fears, their weaknesses. The investigation revealed a pattern as cold as it was methodical. Sarah would befriend her targets, becoming their lifeline, driving them to appointments, helping with grocery shopping, managing their finances. The perfect caretaker, until the moment came to strike. Victim after victim told the same story. Sarah would gain their trust completely, becoming indispensable to their daily lives. Then, usually during a health crisis or moment of vulnerability, she would administer what investigators would later determine to be lethal doses of insulin or other medications, disguised as routine care. Mrs. Eleanor Hartwell, 73, had been one of Sarah's closest neighbors for 5 years. "She was like a daughter to me," Eleanor had told police before her sudden death. "I trusted her with everything." Eleanor's death certificate listed natural causes at the time: heart failure. It wasn't until Sarah's arrest that the truth emerged: a carefully calculated overdose of her heart medication, disguised as a helpful dose from her caring neighbor. But it wasn't just murder. Sarah had been running what amounted to a sophisticated financial exploitation scheme. She'd convince elderly victims to add her to their bank accounts for emergencies. She'd manipulate them into changing wills and life insurance policies. When they died, she would inherit everything. The most chilling discovery came in Sarah's personal journal, found hidden in her basement behind a false wall. The entries revealed a mind that had been planning and executing these crimes for nearly a decade. "I'm getting tired of the old ones," one entry read. "They're becoming predictable. I need something fresher." Another entry sent chills through the entire investigative team. "The Henderson twins are so trusting, such beautiful children. Their parents work late. They're alone most evenings. I could make it look like an accident." The journal detailed elaborate plans for what Sarah called the next phase of her crimes: children. Unsupervised children whose parents trusted the neighborhood caretaker, the woman who volunteered at the elementary school, who organized block parties and school fundraisers. But Sarah's spree came to an end when Mrs. Rose Patterson, 81, didn't die when she was supposed to. The insulin injection Sarah had administered should have killed her within hours. Instead, Rose survived and immediately contacted her daughter, suspicious of Sarah's sudden visit and strange behavior. The needle was cold, Rose told investigators, and she seemed different, desperate somehow, like she needed something from me very badly. That desperate moment was Sarah Mitchell's undoing. When detectives executed the search warrant on her house, they found evidence that painted a picture of a killer who had been operating in the shadows of suburban America for nearly a decade, choosing victims not for their money alone, but for the pure psychological thrill of deception and death. Sarah Mitchell was arrested on a Tuesday morning in March. When Detective Morrison knocked on her door, she answered wearing a floral apron, flour on her hands, as if she'd been baking cookies. "Good morning, officers," she said with that same warm smile. "Is everything all right?" For the first time in 8 years, Sarah Mitchell's perfect mask was cracking.